Welcome back everyone to another entry in the League Encyclopedia, and today we're breaking down patch 1414 in 10 minutes or less. Because honestly, it's a small patch for most of us, and really geared heavily towards elite and pro play. So without further ado, let's go in order of increasing importance, starting with the only item change in the patch. Warmog's armor's bonus health threshold has been increased to 1500 from 1300. The stated goal of this is to reduce supports rushing this item. Now, will it work? Well, not for those who can use it effectively already, like Leona, Alistair, and Braum. It should stop supports like Bard and Rakan from being able to rush it though, and they have other items they can rush anyway, so this is more of a course correction than a true nerf. Let's talk runes next. Again, there's only one, and it matters, but we're talking about a minor rune here, so don't let anyone tell you this is like a massive change. Absorb Life is now a sustain rune for mid-game and late game instead of a sustain rune for early game. Post level 12 to be exact. That's when its power really spikes. This brings its power level more in line with Triumph and Presence of Mind, which in the late game also have insane value. Okay, now let's talk champions. I've broken down the patch into 3 categories. Doesn't matter, matters for elite and pro play, and just neat. In the doesn't matter column, we have Bel'Veth's nerf to her attack range and subsequent buff to her true form means it just doesn't matter that much since you want to be fighting in your true form most of the time anyway, but it does shift some power away from her pre-6. Next up we've got Brand's E having a slightly higher cooldown and slightly less damage. This will not make it less frustrating to play against. Changing the bounce range would have, but I'm not a design lead, so what do I know? Corki's base health being dropped by 30 HP is just small enough that I just don't care. When played correctly, that 30 health will mean nothing to Corki players. Fiddlesticks' fear now being treated as a projectile, it always should have been, so whatever. Jax's E being a slightly higher cooldown will make certain champions able to trade better with him in lane, but just barely, so I don't see this moving the needle much in terms of good matchup versus bad matchup. Kindred's base health has been cut by 15 HP, which is half of what Corki's was cut by, and the bonus attack speed on Q is down by 5%. Is Kindred weaker? Sure, but not enough to say anything about them. Sion's W damage has been buffed to deal more percent max health, which is cool, but it doesn't matter, so... Smolder's Q buff by 5 damage at all ranks is one of those changes that, as a Smolder main, would probably feel like a slap to the face. Quote, we're looking to flatten Smolder's power over game time. Sure you are, Riot. Now, before moving on to the elite and pro section, I want to mention that I know these changes do matter when it comes to these champions' win rates over thousands of games, and in edge cases where they will come up given enough games. When I say that they don't matter, what I mean is that none of these changes should make you start or stop playing these champions. They're minor and represent balance changes in the truest sense of the word. With that said, let's talk elite and pro changes. Aphelios' changes would be in the doesn't matter column if it wasn't for his purple gun change. Not only does the flat damage increase, but so does the bonus AD scaling on a champion who's playing more and more like a caster than a marksman already, meaning he's building more bonus AD than your average ADC. Aurelion Sol got lots of changes, which always makes it hard to predict where he will land, and while his power in lane without a doubt has been nerfed, his identity as a roaming mid laner, which is what he used to be, has been reinforced by buffing his astral flight range. On top of that, the power of his R has been shifted away from the empowered version and into the base form, which to me feels like Riot realizing that waiting for stuff is not good gameplay. They did this with Corki Package, they're doing it with Smolder stacks, and they're doing it here with Aurelion Sol Stardust as well. Hecarim's changes are said to skew him away from elite play by buffing his W healing and flattening the cooldowns of both E and W. This one is for the data, and we will have to see if this works like Riot intends. I think it will though. Aurelia is always a tricky champion to make any kind of predictions about, because when she's good, she's real good. And when she's bad, she's still really good in the right hands. And pros tend to have the right hands, specifically mid lane pros. This buff to her early game power might just be enough to make her a viable AD mid option again. especially with Tristana and Corki being nerfed. Lilia is just being straight up nerfed, so yeah, one less viable AP jungler. Nidalee is also getting a nerf to her damage on W and E in Cougar form, but a crazy buff to her AD ratios on those abilities. So, you know, I'm just kidding. That doesn't really matter for pro play. Although I would love to see AD Nidalee in pro play, I just don't think that's going to happen. So this is one more AP jungler that is less viable now. Tristana's Q finally costs mana. It was also a buff though, so we'll see if the pros still like playing her mid or not. I expect her priority to decrease from like first pick blind every game to maybe every other game. She's still really strong. Zyra, another AP jungler getting nerfs. Oh my god, who would have guessed? Riot really doesn't like it when AP junglers dominate the meta since it skews mid lane too much. Notably, Morgana wasn't hit with any nerfs this patch, so I expect her priority to rise in the coming weeks. Shyvana will likely still be strong in elite play, but I don't expect we're going to see her in pro play. Moving on to the neat column, we've got Cho'Gath, Q and E buffs, which one must say are quite neat. It's actually a lot of damage at max rank for E since it hits up to 3 times. Jace's Cannon Form Q also received a buff, both to base damage and the scaling bonus AD got an additional 5% ratio, so that's pretty neat. Melio received lots of changes, but the most direct one is a nerf to his passive, while the rest are overall neutral. His E-shield has the potential to be a bit bigger than before, but Melio isn't building heavy AP, so we'll just call that one neat and move on. Rumble's changes, you could argue, will affect pro play, and he doesn't belong in the neat category. My counter to that is that Rumble is picked for his R ability more than anything else in pro play. Yes, his laning power is a bit crazy, and this Q nerf does address that. But he will still be a bully, and his R can still decide fights, so to these changes, I just say, neat. Finally, we have Zed. His Q and E received buffs, just like Cho'Gath. And the E one will feel nice, but the Q damage amp is what Zed players are really happy to see, I think. While it's only 10 damage per Q, just like Cho'Gath E, one Q can theoretically hit for up to 3 times, often at least 2. So, it's actually closer to a 20 to 30 damage amp if you think about it. Now this has absolutely no bearing on pro or elite play though, so it's just neat. And that wraps up this entry into the League Encyclopedia. I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you learned something, and if you disagree with any of my takes, I'd be happy to hear from you in the comments below. Thank you for watching my breakdown of patch 14.14 in 10 minutes or less, and I hope to see you in the next entry.